What if everything you were taught about the origin of humanity was incomplete? What if the story of where we came from, our gods, our civilizations, our very DNA, was written down more than 5,000 years ago, on clay tablets buried beneath the deserts of modern-day Iraq? And what if the beings described in those tablets were not metaphors? This is the story of the Anunnaki. And once you hear it, you will never look at human history or at yourself the same way again. The year is approximately 3,500 BC. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved through a land that the ancient Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, literally, the land between the rivers. Here, in what is now southern Iraq, something happened that scientists and historians still struggle to fully explain. In what appears to be almost no time at all, in the blink of an eye by evolutionary standards, a fully formed civilization erupted from nowhere. Not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly. The Sumerians appeared on the world stage already knowing how to write, already knowing mathematics, already possessing a legal system, a calendar, astronomical charts, and a sophisticated understanding of medicine. They invented the plow. They gave us the 60-minute hour and the 24-hour a day, a system the entire modern world still uses right now, in this moment, as you watch this. They built massive cities, Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, cities with sewers, cities with temples that towered into the sky like fingers reaching toward the heavens. And here is the part that scholars find deeply uncomfortable. The Sumerians themselves never claimed credit for any of it. In virtually every one of their surviving texts, and there are hundreds of thousands of them, pressed into clay tablets, many still untranslated, the Sumerians said the same thing over and over. We did not do this alone. They said that beings, powerful, tall, winged beings who came from above, and gave them everything, their writing, their laws, their knowledge of the stars, their understanding of the human body. The Sumerians called these beings Anunnaki, and for a very long time, the world assumed they were simply gods of mythology, colorful stories, religious metaphor. But what if they weren't? The name itself is telling. In Sumerian, Anunnaki is derived from terms that scholars most commonly translate as those of princely seed, or, more evocatively, those who from heaven came to earth. Not from Mount Olympus, not from a mythological realm, from heaven, from above, from the sky. The earliest known written references to the Anunnaki come from inscriptions during the reign of a Sumerian ruler named Gudea, around 2144 BCE. But the stories themselves are far older, passed down through oral tradition for tens of thousands of years before anyone thought to press them into clay. In the Sumerian cosmology, the Anunnaki were the children of An, the god of the heavens, and Kai, the goddess of the earth. They were not one being. They were a council, an assembly, a governing body of powerful entities who held what the Sumerians called the tablets of destiny, the power to decree the fate of every human on earth. Among them, a hierarchy emerged. At the top, Anu, the supreme ruler, who governed from above, rarely descending to earth himself. Below him, two sons who could not have been more different. Enlil, lord of the air, commander of the earth colony, rigid, cold, and uncompromising. He saw humanity as a tool, a resource, something to be managed. And Enki, lord of wisdom and water, scientist and geneticist, whose domain was the ancient city of Eridu. Enki was different. Enki cared about the beings he helped create. He saw in humanity something worth protecting. The tension between these two brothers, Enlil and Enki, would shape the entire course of human history, and it still echoes today. Beyond these two, dozens of Anunnaki names appear across the tablets. There was Inanna, goddess of love and war, fierce and mercurial, whose descent into the underworld is one of the most dramatic stories ever recorded. There was Nana, the moon god, Utu, the sun god and keeper of justice. But most compelling of all, across the tablets, across the statues, across the cylinder seals dug from the earth, is a visual detail that appears again and again. Wings. The Anunnaki are consistently depicted with enormous wings spread from their shoulders. They wear what some researchers describe as wristwatches. Their clothing appears layered and structured, almost like suits, and they are consistently drawn as taller than ordinary humans. Significantly taller. The ancient Sumerians were not imaginative fools. They were precise, technical people who documented grain yields, star movements, and economic transactions with meticulous care. Why would they draw their gods like this, unless they had seen something that looked like this? Fast forward to 1849. An archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard is excavating the ruins of Nineveh, the ancient Assyrian capital buried beneath a mound in modern-day Iraq. What he uncovers becomes one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in human history. Thousands of clay tablets, pressed with tiny wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform, the oldest writing system on Earth. The tablets are shipped to the British Museum, where scholars spend decades attempting to decode them. Eventually, they reveal an entire mythological universe, creation stories, flood narratives, royal lineages, stretching back into what the tablets call the time before the flood, when kings ruled for tens of thousands of years. Most historians classified all of this as mythology. Beautiful, fascinating, but fictional. Then, in 1976, a man stepped forward and said something that changed everything. His name was Zecharia Sitchin. Sitchin was born in Azerbaijan in 1920 and raised in what is now Israel. He was one of a very small number of individuals in the 20th century who could read ancient Sumerian cuneiform at a high level. He spent 30 years analyzing the tablets before he published a single word. And when he did publish, in a book called The 12th Planet, the academic world shook. Sitchin's argument was simple, and it was radical. The Sumerians were not writing mythology. They were writing history. The Anunnaki were not metaphors for natural forces. They were a real, technologically advanced civilization, extraterrestrial in origin, who arrived on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. And according to the tablets, they came here for one reason: gold. Here is where the story gets strange. Not metaphorically strange. Not ancient people misunderstood their environment strange. But deeply, uncomfortably strange. According to Sitchin's translations of the Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki's home planet, which the Sumerians called Nibiru, was in crisis. Its atmosphere was deteriorating. The planet was dying. And the Anunnaki scientists had determined that the only way to save it was to seed their upper atmosphere with gold particles, microscopic gold aerosols that could act as a reflective shield. Sound insane? Consider this. NASA and other space agencies have in recent decades seriously discussed using reflective aerosols to shield Earth's atmosphere from solar radiation. The technology is not absurd. The science is real. The Anunnaki, according to these tablets, needed gold in massive quantities, and when they surveyed the planets of our solar system, they found it. Here, on Earth. So they came, and they began to mine. The tablets describe the establishment of early settlements in what is now the Middle East, a mission control center, a spaceport, processing facilities. Under the joint command of the half-brothers Enlil and Enki, the Anunnaki built what the texts call the Ad-Din, a word that should sound familiar to you. Eden. The Anunnaki began their mining operations in southern Africa, in the Great Rift Valley. And here, something remarkable. Modern archaeology has confirmed the existence of ancient gold mines in southern Africa that date to well over 100,000 years ago. Mines that predate any known human civilization by a staggering margin. Who dug them? The mainstream answer is, we don't know. The Anunnaki answer is, we did. But here is where the story takes its darkest turn. Because mining is hard. It is brutal, backbreaking, physically punishing work. And after tens of thousands of years, the Anunnaki workers, the rank and file members of the expedition, had enough. They mutinied. The tablets describe it in striking detail. The miners put down their tools. They surrounded Enlil's residence. They refused to work. Their suffering, they said, was too great. The Anunnaki leadership faced a crisis. They needed the gold, but they no longer had the labor. And so Enki proposed a solution that would change the history of the universe. Let us create some worker. In the Sumerian creation narrative, a text called the Atrahasis epic, the gods hold a council. The labor problem is discussed. Enki stands before the assembly and makes his case. He is not proposing the creation of a new species from nothing. He is proposing something far more precise. There is a creature already on Earth, a primitive hominin, upright, bipedal, capable of using simple tools. What if, Enki argues, we take this creature's genetic material and combine it with our own? Not an act of creation, an act of enhancement. The other gods debate the morality of this. Even in a civilization 50,000 years ahead of ours, the question of whether it is right to engineer a sentient being as a servant gives them pause. But Enlil needs workers, and Anu gives the command. Enki and the female Anunnaki physician, Ninhursag, working in what the tablets describe as a laboratory, take the reproductive material of a primitive African female and fertilize it with the genetic material of a young Anunnaki male. The resulting embryos are placed in surrogate Anunnaki women. The first attempts fail. Hybrid creatures are born that cannot survive. The tablets record this with clinical precision, almost like scientific notes. Then, finally, a viable hybrid is born. The Sumerians called this being Adamu, the first human. Now set aside for a moment whether you believe this literally, and consider what science tells us. Modern geneticists have confirmed that there is a dramatic, unexplained leap in human DNA that does not follow the gradual pattern of natural evolution. Approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appeared. Not gradually, but with a speed that has baffled evolutionary biologists for decades. we also know something else. Human beings share approximately 99% of their DNA with chimpanzees, yet the cognitive gap between us is almost incomprehensible. Language, abstract thought, art, mathematics, religion, empathy, planning, all of it appeared in a species that, biologically, should barely be more capable than a great ape. Why? Mainstream science says random mutation and natural selection over millions of years. The Sumerian tablets say, because someone intervened. Now, who do you believe? The newly created humans, the Adamu, were not immediately free. According to the tablets, they were placed in a specific location to perform specific tasks. The texts call this place the Edin, the enclosure. The humans worked the mines, they tended the fields, they served the Anunnaki gods. But Enki saw something in his creation that the others did not: intelligence, genuine curiosity, the spark of something greater. And so, according to the tablets, in a story that should sound very familiar, Enki gave the humans something they were not supposed to have: knowledge. In Sumerian mythology, Enki is associated with a substance called the fruit of knowledge, the direct understanding of how the world truly works, the awareness of their own nature, the consciousness of self. When Enlil discovered what Enki had done, he was furious, because a slave who knows what they are is no longer simply a slave. Enlil banished the humans from the Eden, the garden, cast them out to fend for themselves in the wider world without the direct protection and resources of the Anunnaki compound. Does this sound like a story you have heard before? The Garden of Eden, the forbidden fruit, the fall of man, the serpent who gave humans knowledge against the wishes of God. In Sumerian, the word for serpent is Nakash. It is also, intriguingly, used as a title for someone of advanced knowledge, a scientist, an expert in genetics. The Sumerian serpent who gave humanity the fruit of knowledge was Enki, the same Enki who created us, the same Enki who argued for our rights in the divine assembly, the same Enki who, thousands of years later, when Enlil decided to wipe the entire human race from the face of the earth, secretly warned one man to build a boat. His name was Zeusudra, and you know him by another name, Noah. The Great Flood is not just a biblical story. It appears in the mythology of virtually every culture on Earth: Mesopotamia, Greece, India, China, the Americas, the indigenous people of Australia. Flood narratives exist on every inhabited continent, told by people who had no contact with each other. How is that possible? Either every human civilization independently invented the same story, or the flood actually happened, and every civilization remembered it. The Sumerian version predates the biblical version of Noah's Ark by at least 1,000 years. In the Atrahasis epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, the story is told with disturbing specificity. The Anunnaki Council, led by Enlil, made a decision. Humanity had grown too numerous, too noisy, too unpredictable. They were multiplying beyond the gods' ability to control them. There had been droughts and plagues, punishments designed to thin the population, but humans kept coming back. Enlil declared that the next time nature provided a catastrophe large enough to wipe the slate clean, the gods would let it happen. They would not warn humanity. They would not help. They would simply watch. And a glacial melt of apocalyptic scale was coming. But Enki could not do it. He went to the one man he trusted most, a priest, a keeper of Anunnaki wisdom, a man of extraordinary righteousness. The tablets call him Ziusudra. The Akkadian version calls him Utnapishtim. You know him as Noah. Enki could not warn Ziusudra directly. He had sworn an oath to the council. So he did something clever. He spoke to the wall of Ziusudra's reed house. He gave instructions as if narrating a dream. Build a vessel, a specific vessel, with specific dimensions. Load it with every kind of living thing. Gather your family. The rains came, and they lasted 7 days and 7 nights. When the waters receded, Ziusudra sent out birds to test for dry land. And when he emerged, he offered sacrifice to the gods who had let his world be destroyed. Even Enlil, looking at the single surviving human family, felt something close to regret. But here is what the tablets say next that the Bible does not. The Anunnaki, after the flood, needed humanity again. The cities were gone. The infrastructure was gone. The mines abandoned. And so the gods descended once more. They taught the survivors agriculture. They helped rebuild the cities. They restored civilization. They needed us as much as we needed them. Here is where the story expands beyond Mesopotamia. Because if the Anunnaki were real, if these beings genuinely visited Earth and interacted with human civilizations, then we should expect to find their fingerprints in more than just Sumerian tablets. And we do. Across ancient Egypt, the Neteru, the gods, were described as coming from a star system called Zep Tepi, the first time, when beings of extraordinary power descended and established civilization along the Nile. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built to tolerances so precise that even modern engineering would struggle to replicate them, is aligned with the stars of Orion's belt with an accuracy of 0.015 degrees. The 3 pyramids at Giza mirror the 3 stars in Orion's belt, not just in position, but in relative brightness and scale. At the time of their construction, this alignment pointed directly to a specific date, 10,500 BCE, 10,500 years before the Common Era, 12,500 years ago. Yet mainstream historians tell us the pyramids were built around 2,500 BCE by workers with copper tools and hemp ropes. The math doesn't work, the engineering doesn't work, and increasingly, the timeline doesn't work. In ancient India, the Vedic texts describe flying vehicles called Vimanas, craft capable of moving at impossible speeds, emitting light, carrying weapons of devastating power. The descriptions are not vague. They are technical, specific. They describe things that 10,000 years ago no human being should have been able to imagine, unless they saw them. In ancient Mesoamerica, the Maya described beings who came from the stars and gave them their extraordinary calendar. A calendar so precise that it measures celestial cycles with greater accuracy than any calendar developed in Europe until the 20th century. The Dogon people of West Africa possessed detailed knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the existence of Sirius B, a tiny dwarf star invisible to the naked eye, centuries before Western astronomers with telescopes confirmed it. How? Mainstream answer: coincidence, misinterpretation, or exaggeration. Alternative answer: they were told. And then there are the ancient gold mines of southern Africa. Researcher Michael Tellinger spent years documenting the ruins of what he believes are the oldest structures on Earth, located in the Mpumalanga region of South Africa. Stone circles, processing facilities, roads, settlements covering an area of hundreds of square miles, dated by some geologists to well over 200,000 years ago. Built by no known civilization, situated directly above one of the richest gold seams on Earth. The Anunnaki were not peaceful. This is something the ancient texts make absolutely clear, and it is something that their mythology passed down into every subsequent religion on Earth. The gods fought, not symbolically, not metaphorically. They fought with weapons. They fought over territory and resources and pride and lineage. And according to Sitchin's reading of the tablets, they eventually fought with weapons so devastating that they left behind scars that have never been fully explained. In the ancient Sumerian text known as the Lament for the Destruction of Ur, one of the most haunting pieces of literature ever discovered, the city of Ur is described as being destroyed by an evil wind, a wind that came from the west, a wind that swept over the land and killed everything it touched, humans, animals, plants. The text describes symptoms that survivors experienced: skin lesions, burning, disorientation, mass death. The city was not burned, not flooded, not conquered. It was poisoned by something in the air. Sitchin identified this event as having occurred around 2024 BCE, and he made a claim that sent shockwaves through alternative history circles. The Anunnaki's internal war had escalated to the use of nuclear weapons. Is there evidence? In the Sinai Peninsula, the area where many researchers believe the Anunnaki spaceport was located, there exists a vast area of fused glassy sand, trinitite-like material, the kind of substance that forms when sand is exposed to temperatures exceeding the surface of the sun. Similar glass formations have been found in other ancient regions of the Middle East, some with radiation signatures that have puzzled geologists for decades. And in the Indus Valley, the ancient cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, two of the most advanced early civilizations on Earth, collapsed suddenly and completely around 1900 BCE with no clear explanation. Archaeologists found skeletons scattered in the streets, as if death came without warning. Certain skeletons showed elevated radiation levels. No invading army was ever identified. No flood, no famine. They simply ended. Let us step away from ancient texts for a moment and look at something undeniable: your DNA. In 2018, researchers at the University of Washington published findings on what they called alien segments in the human genome, non-coding sequences of DNA that do not appear to have originated from any known ancestor species. Segments that appeared in the human genome at a specific point in time, suddenly, without clear evolutionary precedent. These segments are not junk. They appear to regulate gene expression. They influence brain development, immune function, and cognitive ability. Mainstream geneticists acknowledge these anomalies exist. Their explanation is ongoing research, still incomplete. The Sumerian tablets offer a different explanation. We also know this: of the roughly 25,000 genes in the human genome, approximately 223 of them have no predecessor in the evolutionary tree. No primate ancestor has them. No gradual evolutionary pathway has been mapped for them. 223 genes that appeared in humanity as if inserted from outside the known biological chain. Mainstream science says horizontal gene transfer from bacteria over millions of years. The tablets say the Anunnaki put them there. And here is perhaps the most haunting genetic detail of all. Compared to other primates, the human chromosome count is wrong. We have 46 chromosomes. Every other great ape has 48. At some point in human prehistory, two chromosomes fused into one. Scientists call this chromosome two fusion. It is confirmed. It happened. But it was not a random mutation. Random chromosome fusions in nature almost always result in sterility. For this fusion to have propagated through the entire human species, it would have had to occur and survive in an extraordinarily controlled environment, almost like a laboratory. Here is the question that no one who knows this story can avoid. Where are they now? The Anunnaki, according to the tablet, did not stay. As human civilization grew, as we became capable of governing ourselves, building our own cities, writing our own laws, they withdrew, gradually, then completely. The last direct Anunnaki presence in human history is described in texts from around 2000 BCE. After that, silence. But the tablets also contain something else, a prophecy. The Anunnaki cycle is tied to the orbit of Nibiru, the planet Sitchin identified as having an elongated, elliptical orbit that brings it near Earth approximately every 3,600 years. Each time Nibiru approaches, according to the tablets, there is upheaval on Earth. Climate disruption, political chaos, technological leaps. The Anunnaki used these orbital windows to travel between Nibiru and Earth. And the tablets suggest that when Nibiru comes around again, they will return. Sitchin, in his final book, The End of Days, calculated that the next potential return window had opened around 2012. The same year, the Mayan long count calendar completed its great cycle. The world did not end in 2012. But consider what has happened since. The pace of human technological advancement has become almost incomprehensible. Artificial intelligence systems that did not exist 5 years ago can now pass bar exams, generate scientific hypotheses, and write code. We have mapped the human genome. We have sent probes to the edges of the solar system. We have detected gravitational waves from collisions of black holes billions of light years away. Something is accelerating humanity. Something is pushing us forward. Is it simply our own ingenuity? Or is there a hand behind the curtain? Let us be fair. Let us be honest. Mainstream historians and archaeologists have rejected Sitchin's translations as pseudoscience. Credentialed Sumerologists have pointed out that his readings of certain tablets diverge significantly from accepted translations. This is true, and it must be acknowledged. The Anunnaki, in the scholarly consensus, are gods of mythology, no more extraterrestrial than Zeus or Thor. The Sumerian king list, which records rulers with lifespans of tens of thousands of years, is interpreted as symbolic, a literary device for conveying divine authority, not a literal historical record. The flood myth appears in so many cultures because catastrophic floods actually happened during the Holocene period, as glaciers melted at the end of the last ice age. Local floods, devastating and memorable, became universal stories as humans told and retold them. The pyramids, while remarkable, can be explained by organized labor, sophisticated but non-supernatural engineering, and a society with the resources to sustain a large workforce over decades. This is the mainstream position. It is internally consistent. It is defensible. But it does not explain the chromosome 2 fusion. It does not explain 223 genes with no evolutionary ancestry. It does not explain the ancient gold mines of southern Africa dated to 200,000 years ago. It does not explain the glass of the Sinai or the sudden collapse of Mohenjo-Daro or the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B. It does not explain why virtually every ancient civilization on Earth, independently, without contact, described tall, winged, skyborne beings who taught them knowledge and demanded gold. The mainstream is not lying, but it may be looking away. Because some questions, if you follow them to their logical conclusion, do not lead to comfortable answers. They lead to the possibility that we are not what we think we are. That our history is not what we have been told. That we are, perhaps, a designed species, engineered for a purpose, on a planet that was once a colony. Look at your hands. These hands can build cities, paint masterpieces, perform surgery, write poetry, comfort a dying friend. These hands that can create weapons capable of destroying civilization, and they can reach across a table and hold someone they love. No other creature on Earth has hands like these. No other creature on Earth has minds like these. Why? Evolution? Divine creation? Cosmic accident? Or were we made this way? The Anunnaki story, whatever its ultimate truth, forces us to confront a question that religion, science, and philosophy have all circled around for thousands of years without resolution. Why are we here? The Sumerians believed they knew. They were created to serve, to work, to mine gold for beings whose mastery of science and genetics was so far beyond their comprehension that they could only describe it as divine. But then Enki intervened. Enki gave the slaves knowledge, and the slaves, us, eventually outgrew our masters. We built our own cities. We wrote our own laws. We developed our own science. We reached out toward the stars with our own hands. And the gods left. Or perhaps they simply stepped back to watch. There is a phrase in the book of Genesis that has puzzled theologians for thousands of years. In the creation narrative, God says, and this is the original Hebrew, Nasa Adam B'Tselmenu. Let us make man in our image. Us, our, not I, not my, the plural, the council. The ancient Hebrews borrowed heavily from Sumerian texts. Scholars have confirmed this. The flood narrative, the garden story, the creation account, all of them appear in Sumerian form, centuries or millennia before the Hebrew version. And in the Sumerian version, there was no single god giving that command. There was a council of Anunnaki, debating whether to create us. 500,000 clay tablets were recovered from the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. Of those, only a fraction have been translated. Thousands more remain buried in the ground, waiting for the right archaeologist, the right moment, the right question. We do not know what they say. We do not know what ancient mining sites in southern Africa will reveal when fully excavated. We do not know what is causing the unexplained acceleration of human cognitive evolution that geneticists began documenting in the 21st century. We do not know why two of our chromosomes fused in a way that should have ended our species but instead created us. We do not know who or what built the structures at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the oldest known monumental construction on Earth, dated to 11,500 BCE. We do not know who taught the builders. We do not know who told them to bury it when they were done, covering the entire complex in earth as if hiding it from someone, or hiding it for someone. We do not know if Nibiru exists. Modern astronomy has not confirmed it. But modern astronomy has also confirmed the existence of a gravitational influence in the outer solar system, something pulling on the orbits of distant objects that scientists call Planet 9, whose existence is mathematically probable, but whose location remains unknown. We do not know if the Anunnaki will return, but we know this. Every civilization that ever existed on Earth, without exception, looked up at the night sky and believed that something up there had been involved in their creation. Not out of primitive superstition, not out of fear of thunder, out of memory, deep inherited cellular memory of something that happened at the very beginning of our story. Something written into the marrow of our bones and the architecture of our minds. We remember, in some wordless, ancestral way, that we were not always alone. The Anunnaki did not just build our civilization. According to the clay tablets pressed into existence 5,000 years ago by hands that understood the weight of what they were recording, the Anunnaki built us. And somewhere, in the great elliptical darkness beyond the orbit of Neptune, if the tablets are correct, they are coming back. The story of the Anunnaki spans 5,000 years of recorded human history, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more before that. We have covered the main chapters, but there are dozens more. The wars of the gods, the story of Inanna's descent, the secret knowledge of Enki, the mystery of the Nephilim, the hidden connections between the Anunnaki and every major world religion. If you want to go deeper, and you should, the primary sources are the Sumerian tablets themselves, available through academic translation projects. Zecharia Sitchin's Earth Chronicles series is the essential starting point for the alternative reading. And the work of researchers like Michael Tellinger, Graham Hancock, and Andrew Collins continues to push the edges of what we think we know. The questions are real. The evidence is real. The tablets are real. What you do with them is up to you. Subscribe. Share this with someone who is ready to have their mind opened, and keep asking the questions that matter.